Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the U Talk Show. This is Horst. I am Kyle, and today we are talking about something we touched on in episode 1 of Man Week, and that is who and what is not the answer. We mentioned that there are snake oil salesmen out there. We have mentioned there are people who are essentially false prophets giving terrible guidance. So let's talk about some of these people. Let's talk about some examples and why they are really not the answer. So, first up, I have Milo Yiannopoulos. He's kind of an old one by today's standards. Yeah. Don't worry. I
No,
know that
I'm just cringing that you mispronounced his last name.
What is it? Yiannopoulos?
Yeah, Yiannopoulos.
That's what I said. I thought that's what I said. Okay, moving on. Anyway,
Yiannopoulos. I was like,
here's the thing. If you don't know about him, basically he got well known.
Milo is a twink who wants to give you self-help advice.
Well, I was going to say he got famous for debating stupid people, and anyone
Isn't
can
that
look
just Steven
intelligent.
Crowder?
Well, I mean him too, but there's sort of a difference there, or rather a difference in why
approach. Yeah,
approach, but also why I'm using them. Like I'm using them as examples for different things. So he's on the list here. But basically, he looks intelligent because he's debating stupid people, and therefore he makes really stupid things look intelligent and look like it's real politics. He is a distraction in the same way that media machines are a distraction. Okay, media machines, they distract you with vapid, pointless topics, identity politics, just because he is on the refutation side, shall we say, of certain issues doesn't make him any better. He is just riding that wave. Then we've got someone like Steven Crowder, who will actively mislead you in regards to important issues, such as taking very tiny portions of graphs meant to depict the overall warming of the globe, and then using that tiny little portion of that graph as proof that global warming isn't real. Now, what he's doing is he's selling gratification to those who don't want to believe, that the solutions to big problems are more complicated and that even big problems don't exist.
He's selling moral outrage.
He's selling moral outrage. He's selling the simplification of the world, and he is selling gratification, easy gratification for people who want it. And he again is riding that wave. Someone like him is not the answer because he's not really providing you a benefit. In the same way that Milo Yiannopoulos is not really providing you any benefit. One is acting as a distraction. The other one is deliberately providing you with misleading information that gives you a false understanding. And they're both riding a wave of reactionism against something that admittedly is stupid, but doesn't really matter overall. Again, that in itself is a distraction. They are merely being part of that distraction.
So I'm reminded of yet another man smelling. I'm reminded of another man selling snake oil. That being Dr. Jordan Peterson. Now, I must preface this with Jordan Peterson earned his credentials honestly. He is a psychologist. He has a lot of interesting things to say about how we as humans view the world. He also, a number of years ago, sold a highly successful book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote for Chaos. And a lot of this was the things that you've been hearing from your parents since you were 6. Tidy your room, make sure you get up at a good time, don't waste your life. And we've more recently seen that he has presented from what looked like his kitchen, a disheveled scrap of a man, visually, with what looked like a hell of a lot of chaos behind him. And to me, that suggests that perhaps Dr. Peterson, despite his academic credentials, has come to realize that a one-size-fits-all solution made of aphorisms and platitudes may not actually work in every situation.
Interesting, because I mean, I think we're somewhat in disagreement here. Now, admittedly, I don't know a hell of a lot about Dr. Jordan Peterson. However, I did listen to a summary of his 12 Rules for Life, and him, like, what I've heard about him these days is that he's very burnt out, and
Oh yeah, he went off the deep end a few years ago.
Yeah, well, I'm hearing that he's very burnt out because essentially he's dealing with a kind of emotional weight due to that. But basically, kind of like what we're discussing here, he's trying to, he's trying to draw attention in a similar way that we're trying to provide guidance. He's trying to draw attention to, issues facing young men and how they're disenfranchised. And, the response he keeps getting is basically, who cares? Who gives a shit? Why should we care about that? And
I mean, respectfully, men have been dealing with why should we give a shit about you since the 1800s. I spoke earlier about the role of man as provider and how that's part of our identity. And a thing that I want to address now is that men were historically valued for what they could physically provide until they crumbled. We have people who work the mines these days. They're not 6 foot tall, and they're not actually, some of them are pulling 6 figures. But more to the point, they're working themselves 6 feet under way too early. Men have been taught that their intrinsic value is tied to how far they can push themselves before they catastrophically fail.
Yeah, essentially, how much material wealth can they provide? And that's a huge problem in society today. That we are, it's an idea that's pushed essentially, that the commercial interest for everyone, and I'm not talking specifically corporations. I'm talking everyone's commercial interest, their financial situation is the most important thing in the world. Now, even in the early 1800s, people understood that there was more to life than that. Yes, it was becoming somewhat more prevalent, but people understood that there was more than that. It really only started changing in the very late 1800s during the Gilded Age, when we saw industrialization and a massive amount of people, instead of owning and farming their own small plot of land, essentially moving into cities and being workers in an industrial plant, creating textiles and industrial goods, and then essentially on that being paid pennies for their work, essentially, and not being able to earn a proper living off of that gives them a level of comfort and financial security. And essentially from that situation all the way to today, we've seen this same through line, which is that we've gotten a worse economic situation, and more recently, even with that worse economic situation in place, it's become even worse for men, because we've lost, again, that place in society as provider. At least then we had that purpose. We were the provider for a family. And, even though it could fluctuate, sometimes get very bad, sometimes get a little better, we had that. And now it's both getting worse, and at the same time that it gets worse, we have essentially no defined role in society. And so that is, I think that is essentially, where Jordan Peterson was trying to do some good, is he was trying to teach you essentially how to cope in life, how to maintain a level of control and security over yourself and your immediate surroundings, which again, I think to some degree
I don't
works.
disagree with this, but I point out that his own strategies seem to have failed even him, which suggests that if it were that simple, everyone would already do it. And there is more to having a fulfilling life and being a fulfilled person.
Perhaps. Although I think, and this is actually because we talked about perspectives in the last episode, I think, or when we were talking about intellectual development. This is very interesting because we have different perspectives. Your perspective is he's missing something. My perspective is, although that's a possibility, my perspective is more he's worked himself too hard. He's burning himself out, and he's taken on an emotional burden that is not just very high, but not particularly
something that ultimately he wasn't prepared for.
Well, yeah, basically, you almost took the words out of my mouth there. That very, very much he wasn't prepared for it, and I think that he wasn't prepared for it because it was a higher emotional burden than just about most people are expected or should be expected to deal with. I think he went above and beyond and wasn't ready for it. Maybe even didn't fully understand the burden that he was taking on, and it very much broke him. And so what he needs is essentially a vacation in my mind, and to kind of get away from it all, get away from the terrible societal cultural shittiness that sees it as okay for men to be disenfranchised, because that for him is very depressing, and I understand why. And so we're going to run out of time here, so we should move on. Someone like Donald Trump, in a political sense, he is very much a snake oil salesman. And is very much not the answer.
Can you please edit the video so that when you say that name, there's a vomit emoji over my face?
Maybe.
Donald Trump is so much a criminal that it's amazing the Brits didn't send him to Australia. There, I said it.
I mean, oh God, the multiple layers of that joke. I like it, but we're going to run out of time if we don't move on. So Donald Trump is the kind of charlatan that is basically going to just use people, and he's not going to do anything for anyone that isn't as rich as he is. He is essentially the epitome of this very corporatist, commercial interest-driven society that is the US. They are very much, they are commercialism taken to its extreme. And he is the epitome of that. And he was able to ride the wave of anger that was building in everyone and use people to put himself in a position of power. And ultimately, when he was in that position of power, he did sweet fuck all for the people that got him there. And rightfully, he was unelected. He only lasted a term because, well, basically, he didn't really do anything for anyone. In fact, he promised to drain the swamp. He made the swamp bigger and more toxic.
You know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Do you know what the difference between Hitler and Trump is?
What?
Hitler actually got affordable healthcare for Germans.
Oh, actually, that's a kind of a fair point, and probably going to get instantly cancelled for this. But at least Hitler fucking did something for the people that he was in charge of. Now, ultimately, he completely fucked over all of Europe, but before he
also did a lot of things to people that he wasn't responsible for, which were morally abhorrent.
Yeah.
But this is what I'm sort of pointing out. When we look at Trump as, let's look at part of the identity of being a man for a second. I think that it's important to have integrity, to do the things that you say that you will do. Quite frankly, to assert that Trump isn't a man may be emotionally satisfying, but it is inaccurate. But certainly by my standards of what a man is, he is a failure of a man. He did not have the capability or the drive to act with integrity. And he hurt a lot of people because he failed to do so.
Yeah, that's actually a big thing, which we'll get into next episode, is integrity. Literally got it as a note in all caps, integrity.
Oh, yeah.
But that, we're going to run out of time soon, so let's move along. This is going to be, actually, I'll do that one last. First, Ben Shapiro. He is the person who mimics intellectualism by arguing simple matters in complicated terms, talking fast, and sneaking in premises that make his argument untouchable for all the wrong reasons.
Ah, yes, Ben Shapiro and his doctor wife.
Yeah. So here's my favorite example. He's not, against women choosing what to do with their own bodies. I can't even remember the full first part of the quote. He's against killing babies, and this was him arguing abortion. So he snuck in the premise there by talking really fast. He snuck in the premise that getting an abortion, that basically getting an abortion was killing a baby. When the best
his wife is allegedly a medical doctor. How did she not slap him?
Don't know. Doesn't matter in my mind. But the thing is, for that argument, essentially he's sneaking in that premise. And that's how he looks like he's very intelligent. That's how he looks like he is, teaching people things. But essentially he's giving them, again, the wrong lessons, just like everyone else we've mentioned so far. Donald Trump, he basically said all of the right things about the problems, but then he didn't provide any real solutions. Steven Crowder lies about the problems and doesn't provide any real solution. He just provides gratification. Milo Yiannopoulos, he looks intelligent by debating morons, but in the end, it's just entertainment. He's not providing any real solutions. He's just providing a distraction. And Ben Shapiro, he provides this false intellectualism, this feeling of this air of superiority. That's what he's selling. You'll notice that each of these people that I've mentioned, they're selling something to you, and it's not a solution, but it's a feeling. They're gripping your emotions, and they're essentially bringing you along with them on this ride, and it feels good, but it doesn't actually get you anything good. And so
it does get us something, though, that we are lacking in society that I would like to quickly address.
We're about to run out of time, so very quickly.
I just need to say it. Emotional validation has been commodified in so many respects for men because it's not something that we as men are able to give to each other in the same ways that we previously have because of the various factors isolating us from each other.
Yeah. And, that kind of goes back to what we're talking about community, is that we very much lack community in modern society. You have to go all the way out into the country to get it. And so, moving on, though, because we're about to run out of time, the next one is, I'm just going to group them all together, majority and minority identitarians. These can be your uber feminista types. These can be your
hypermasculinist types.
Yeah, hypermasculine skinheads, whatever it is.
This can be your latte-sipping leftists.
Yeah, but basically they blame all of society's problems on race, religion, gender, and sexuality. These are the people who push identity politics, and they are absolutely fucking useless. Don't bother with them. They will not provide you solutions. They will only provide you with somebody to blame in the same way that Hitler blamed the Jews for everything. Yes, I said it. Now, the next one...
Shit, goddamn. Okay.
The second one is corporate media. It's literally propaganda. It will provide you a false understanding. I'm doing a whole ass 2-hour documentary on it, which I, really need to get more of done.
Someone is going to go through all our videos and count the amount of times that you've mentioned your documentary before actually releasing it.
I might do it myself.
There's a good idea for anyone who wants to use this to create content. That's how you do it. Go through the entire thing, count the amount of times that Kyle mentions his documentary, just have one of those counters with a ding in the corner. It's cheap, lazy content, and it'll be an excuse for you to go back through our entire archive, get an idea of where we're coming from.
Yeah. It's so, essentially literal propaganda. Corporate media is basically huge media machines owned by corporations. We're talking, Sky News and anything owned by Murdoch. Channel 10, Channel 9, Channel 7, basically all the TV channels and all of the newspapers that are owned by the same corporations that own those television channels. They're literal propaganda. They are pinpoint precision designed to give you a false understanding of important political issues. You will learn nothing from them. And then last but not least, this is a controversial one, and a lot of people are going to a lot of people will defend or attack this person for various reasons. And I am going to say that I, in part, agree with this person on some things, on some levels. Andrew Tate. Now, the problem with Andrew Tate is that he is toxic.
The problem with Andrew Tate is that he got baited by an autistic Swedish girl into getting wrecked, into getting arrested for things that were objectively morally abhorrent. If he had any of the discipline that he encourages his devotees to develop, he would have shut the fuck up and he would not have been arrested.
Yeah. But that being said, I will give him some degree of fairness here that he may not deserve, and that is to say that the matter is before the courts and it has not been concluded yet. Therefore, I am not going to make an assumption on his potential illegal wrongdoings. That is his charges.
I'm not making an assumption about his potential illegal wrongdoings.
Not saying that
I'm just saying that you have to be really, really daft to get arrested because you couldn't help yourself from tweeting.
Yes.
Oh, isn't that like Donald Trump that you mentioned earlier?
Well, kind of. Only Donald Trump, his tweets tend to, like, half of his tweets were actually pointing out problems in society, which are actually true. But that being said, that's a whole other story. We don't have any more time for that. But I will say about Andrew Tate that his views on what it is to be a man and what it means to be a man, they are partly correct. And the part that is correct is, partially some of the harshest things that he's got to say. Like, as a man, you're born without value. I think generally speaking, as a person, everyone is born without value.
Yeah.
You earn that value in life. First, you spend, almost 20 years learning and developing, and then you spend, 10 years developing while putting what you've already learned into action. And then hopefully by the time you're 30 to 35, you have a proper sense of self and you understand and have developed enough in the ways that we talked about in the last episode to really be able to make a difference in your life, the life of those people around you, and in your community and in the world. And essentially, you're able to advance yourself further and further and push the boundaries, push your abilities until you achieve something great. Now, that being said, that is somewhat taken away by, if it turns out to be concluded in court that he is indeed guilty, it kind of gets taken away by the fact that he, again, if it's proven before the court, is a sex trafficker and a rapist. But that being said, what I think takes more away from his points is his toxic and closed-minded nature, his arrogance, and his conspiratorial views on how the world works. Now, granted, there are actual conspiracies out there. There are actual things that big, powerful, elite people are doing that are terrible, reprehensible, and they're essentially controlling how things work.
Yeah, like unlimited rental hikes, like deliberately suppressing wages, reducing penalty rates so that we do not have the idea of a day that is guaranteed to be family time. These are all things that people in positions of power have decided to do to us.
Yeah, and see, the biggest problem with all that is that what the real conspiracies are actually a lot more mundane. It's the rich are just trying to maintain their rich place in society. Therefore, they corrupt politics with political donations, otherwise known as legalized bribery. Whereas there are problems with fiat currencies that mean that we have hyperinflation and a bunch of other things that are quite terrible. Then there's and then there's how he talks about it. He literally calls it the Matrix. He gives it this super like what's the word? He gives it a theme, a name. He gives it a narrative. and it almost feels
that the people who made the Matrix would have just punched on me with him for being such an insufferable wanker.
Perhaps. But that being said, what I see in Andrew Tate is very good physical development, very good perseverance. However, he has hampered through his toxic and closed-minded and arrogant attitude, literally admitting that he doesn't read ever. Like he'll never read a book. He'll never read anything. He'll never experience another point of view. He lacks a true understanding of the world. He lacks a true understanding of the root causes of many problems in society. And I'll just scroll back up. Where is my thing? Just scroll back up so I can remember the. So that's a bit weird. Maybe I just imagined it and forgot to write that down. But essentially, with the intellectual development, he lacks a true perspective on everything. Like he has a perspective, but in his mind, his view of things is the right view of things. It's not one way of doing it, which is working really well for him. It is the right way to do things. It is the only way to do things. And while it has worked for him, it very well might not work for other people.
Yes.
And so,
and I mean, as I mentioned with regards to Dr. Peterson, there may come a day when it doesn't work for him anymore either.
Yeah. And so, what you need essentially, what he teaches is personal development. Can't even speak. What he teaches is perseverance first and foremost, which is good. And then he kind of, in terms of personal development, he's got the physical and professional development down, and he's kind of got a mental fortitude down, but he hasn't got the proper intellectual development there. He doesn't promote this, an understanding of the world through the experiencing of alternate perspectives and, understanding where those are coming from. And so that's where he essentially gets it wrong. I think unlike the others, I think he genuinely believes a lot of the stuff he says, and I think he's not trying to be a snake oil salesman, but he is getting only part of the picture. And I think that what he is imparting onto people is, in part, a very toxic, arrogant nature. And I think that that's not going to work for a lot of people because a lot of people aren't rich like him and they haven't started out. And I mean, look, he didn't start out rich himself. But, he essentially, in not starting out rich and having that kind of arrogant and toxic mindset, I don't think that's going to get a lot of people anywhere. Does that make sense?
I think we spent a lot of time talking about Andrew Tate. I'm not entirely sure what to take away from it other than he seems to believe what he's saying, but doesn't realize that it only applies sometimes. And is an incomplete picture of reality.
Yeah, that is essentially the point that we're getting to, or, the point that I was trying to get to. So, if that's what you're taking away, then I guess I did explain it well, and it does make sense. So, yeah. Man. Get it? Because it's Man Week. Anyway, I think with that, we'll leave it because we've run a fair bit over time. But yeah, hopefully this helps you to recognize how some people can have part of the picture and be partly right, but ultimately are not entirely the answer. How other people are essentially snake oil salesmen trying to use you, and how others are just trying to sell you something, be that gratification, a feeling of superiority, or even just sheer entertainment. However, they are giving you false understandings and just distracting you from actually solving problems that matter. And with that, we hope that you've learned something, and have a great day.
Have a good night, y'all.